Hi everyone. In response to Carlos's prompt, Art That Lives Beyond the Page, I would like to share a movie I made for my sister in 2020. At the time she was undergoing chemotherapy and would prefer to listen rather than to read.
What?
Making a project for Counter Arts.
Do you want a hand?
No thanks, dear.
No worries.
Presenting Living in the Tree of Life. The Bottle Tree. Preface. If we go to the trouble of internet searching a commentary on the Tree of Life, we find all sorts of texts that are biblical, multi-religious, spiritual, philosophical, and diagrammatic in nature. I tend to be attracted to the colourful graphics that have a spiritual element and love my special Tree of Life pendant, which was given to me as a gift. I wear it often and like it for no other reason than it is sparkly and tends to portray me, the wearer, as someone who considers the possibility of a higher power and the mysteries of the cosmos from time to time, regardless of whether I do or not. When I look at an image of the Tree of Life, I see a representation of all that is, the interweaving branches of life experience intermingled with spirituality and the synchronicity of the universe. Of course, all living trees are trees of life. I have chosen a handful of examples and related them and their tree names to some fictional stories. In some instances, the tree itself becomes the subject of my story. In others, the tree name hints at the story's content. I hope you enjoy story number 1, The Bottle Tree. Jean. It had been a superb day, hadn't it? The sun had been gloriously high in the sky, radiating just enough warmth to be perfect. With the onset of autumn, the humidity had abated, leaving the day crisp and hot, not wet and sweaty. A big plus for the slightly more elderly who found the full-on summer weather draining and not so much fun to be out and about in. I had fallen asleep in the midday sun, stirring, reluctantly awake as the sea breeze slipped in and out of the sandy, grassy dunes where I rested. Without raising my head from the towel that had been rolled into a ball for neck support, I squinted through bleary eyes to appreciate the old bottle tree growing just feet away. I was fascinated by its bulbous trunk and surprised by its naked branches, clawing at the sky. I knew the Australian bottle tree to be deciduous in nature, but it seemed quite early for the complete loss of its leaves. I hoped it wasn't dying. As I lay daydreaming, threatening to fall back asleep in the soft warmth of the sandy dale, a flash of light caught my attention. My interest was piqued, and I raised myself into an upright position to better see what it was that had glistened in the still bright light of day. Something was poking up out of the sandy soil in front of the bottle tree. It appeared to be resting against the dried wood of the old trunk. Something that was green and yellow and iridescent. Something that was all at once intriguing and familiar. Not bothering to stand up, I scrabbled across the soft dune surface to investigate. It was a bottle, half buried beneath the tree, gleaming unnaturally, I thought, considering it appeared to have been buried for some time. I felt, rather than knew, that the rising roots of the tree had gently forced the bottle from beneath the surface of the soil, where it waited patiently for someone to discover it. I used my fingers to scrabble around in the dirt, loosening and finally freeing my find from the grip of the bottle tree. Huh! A bottle belonging to a bottle tree. I thought that was quite curious in itself, apart from the fact that the bottle was not like anything I had ever seen before. It was, as I mentioned, made of opaque yellow glass, reflecting shades of green. It had a bulbous base supporting a narrow neck wedged with a slender, undamaged glass stopper. I wiggled and jiggled the stopper until I freed it with a sudden plop, and wondered briefly if the bottle held ancient rum from an old pirate ship. I am a bit of a daydreamer. Turning the bottle upside down, I gently patted its bulbous bottom. Nothing fell from within. I pushed a wary eye to the opening, but was unable to see anything within its mysterious insides, just a dark and cavernous nothing. Oh well, I thought, looks like Jean now owns a rather pretty new ornament. I couldn't for the life of me think of an appropriate place in my home to showcase my new possession. Actually, I couldn't really picture the inside of my home at all, but I let that fleeting concern dissipate as I gathered my towel and stuffed the bottle into my colourful beach bag. Resting the lovely new acquisition on top of the towel, I dusted myself free of dune sand and wandered off the beach and onto the boulevard that was busy with locals and tourists alike. Melting into the stream of people, I turned first one way and then another, unsure of my bearings and completely confused as to which direction I should take to get home. I knew I didn't drive, so I wasn't concerned with finding my car, but the more I thought about it, the less confident I felt about where it was that I lived. I had heard of people suffering memory lapses similar to what I seemed to be experiencing, and became coldly afraid that I might be having some sort of Alzheimer's attack. I wasn't young anymore. How old exactly? I knew I was possibly within the at-risk age group. Trying to shrug off the cold fear, weird in the summer sun, I chose to go left and wandered haphazardly down the boulevard, hoping to spot something I recognized and get my bearings. Shrugging my beach bag into a more comfortable position on my shoulder, I gained some comfort by recognizing the bag as something colorful and familiar. I patted it with a slightly wrinkled hand and walked on with more confidence, my flip-floppy sandals making little noises on the pavement as I walked. Reaching the end of the boulevard, I seemed to vaguely remember the T intersection and took the right turn, using the pedestrian crossing on a green walk signal. But before too long my confidence dwindled, and I knew with certainty that I had been going around in circles, walking through suburban streets and finding myself back on the boulevard more than once. Scratching my head in confusion with panic setting in, I spotted a sign on a slightly seedy-looking building that proclaimed itself to be the Beachside Drop-In Centre, so I figured I might as well drop in and see if there was anybody there that could help me.
"Help ya?"
inquired a young, slightly dishevelled man, sporting a tousled head of unruly hair and several days of beard growth. A greenie, I declared to myself, the type that has a university degree and very little real-world knowledge or experience. How did I know that, I wondered. "Yes, I hope so," I replied agreeably, keeping my somewhat negative thoughts to myself. "I don't appear to know who I am or where I actually live." I shrugged my shoulders in an effort to portray confusion and helplessness.
"Any ID on ya?"
Stupid question from a stupid boy. No, if I had ID I would know who I was and where I lived." I was beginning to feel less worried about my own mental capacity and more concerned about the do-gooder. The fellow laughed, a pleasant enough sound.
"Of course,
He acquiesced.
I can be a bit dense sometimes."
"I suppose we shouldn't expect too much," I replied as kindly as I possibly could. "Perhaps you are working above your pay grade." The pleasant countenance of the young man darkened.
"What?"
"Oh," I replied, brightening considerably. "I remember that my name is Jean."
"Jean what?"
"Just Jean, I think." I smiled to indicate that I had meant no harm by my comments and was hoping we could move forward. The man thought for a minute and decided to humour me.
"Okay, Jeannie, I'm Peter."
"I'm not." Confusion again. This time it was Peter's turn.
"Not what?"
"Not Jeannie, absolutely not Jeannie, just Jean." Peter decided to bait me.
Okay, not Jeanie, just Jean. What are we going to do with you?
I looked at him with baleful eyes. There is no we in this equation. What are you going to do with me? Peter scratched his head thoughtfully.
Well, I suppose the mere fact that you have remembered at least part of your name is helpful. We could wait to see if you feel better in the morning, or we could get you down to the public hospital now.
What happens if we wait until morning? I inquired, hoping that Peter wouldn't insist on the hospital option.
You can have a bed here and see if you remember more tomorrow. If you can't, you can choose, back on the street or a hospital bed.
The meal provided by the drop-in centre was passable, but the rest of the night was not. The beds were bare-bones camp stretchers, placed in rows through a cavernous room that I figured had once been the town hall. The occupants of the beds were mainly smelly, suspicious characters who appeared to be more interested in my beach bag than in me, so I felt compelled to place my bag under the scrawny pillow provided by the centre. I had 3 possessions that I was aware of: a towel, a curious bottle, and a bag to put them in. I was not going to relinquish said possessions to a dropkick with a trolley full of dubious-looking crap, an alcohol drug problem, and an inability to find clean water to wash in. Duh, there was a whole ocean across the road. Salt water, sure, but better than nothing at all. Oh, and what about the showers and taps liberally placed along the foreshore? Not my business to judge, I suppose, but I did anyway. You would too if you had to sleep on a collapsible bed that was trying to do just that, collapse all night long. Adding to the stress was the anomalous desire to sleep, coupled with the fear of sleeping, thereby risking losing the few items in my possession. Then there was the ever-present desire to get up and deliver death blows to the stinking bum snoring in the cot next to me. I get that I do not sound very ladylike, especially for a more senior member of society, but I had been reduced to fighting for survival. The weird thing was, the scenario in which I found myself didn't seem all that foreign. This thought concerned me somewhat, but I had no choice but to wait until the morning threw welcome light onto my situation, and the opportunity to sneak out of the Hall of Horrors and return to whatever it was that was my life situation.
Wakey, wakey, Jeanie. Time to get up, have something to eat and see how your brain is this morning.
The realization that I had finally slept, and slept late, coupled with the use of a pet name that had an unreasonable effect on my demeanour, caused me to sit bolt upright, my right hand floundering around under the pathetic lump of fabric Peter called a pillow. I breathed a sigh of relief. My beach bag was still there, along with the familiar lump that was my towel and new, now considered precious, bottle. As I slowly came to full wakefulness, a sudden and brilliant image, or was it a memory, flitted across my consciousness. I was standing in a beautiful room of brilliant colours, all yellows and greens. Within the room were the most luxurious furnishings I had ever seen. Soft, comfortable lounges covered in amazing cushions of shimmering fabrics. Tassels hung off absolutely everything, wall hangings, throws, and the plumpest of pillows. In my vision, I gazed down at my feet to see that I was standing on a Persian-styled rug of many colours, and whilst I was amazed to see my feet encased in the flip-flops that were actually on my feet in the real world, I was more surprised to find myself thinking that everything looked incredibly familiar. The rug upon which I stood reminded me of magic carpets I had seen in childhood storybooks, and for a second I absolutely did not doubt that the one upon which I was dream standing was capable of whisking me off on the most amazing adventures, if only I knew how to start it.
Come on, old girl.
Peter was trying to haul me off the revolting little bed and back into reality.
Have you thought of something?
He was shaking me a little too roughly. I lost the vision in my head and focused on the unkempt face that swam into view before my eyes. "I'm okay," I snapped, shaking Peter's hand from my arm. "I think I remembered something. What's for breakfast?"
What did you remember?
He scratched at chin stubble thoughtfully.
Sausages and eggs, but you only get some if you let me look through that bag you seem so hell-bent on protecting.
I remembered a beautiful room with great furniture. I was struggling to keep up with Peter, who seemed to be rushing across the hall, through the last stragglers who had also slept late. I couldn't wait to be free of the stink of the homeless, so I kept my mouth shut and my aging legs pumping. One end of the hall had been set up with trestle tables and chairs. Breakfast was being gobbled down by the overnight residents, and I couldn't decide what was worse, the cloying smell of cooked eggs or the people smell that seemed to permeate everything in the building. Peter urged me to sit beside him at a table and raised his hand at one of the youth workers dishing up food behind a counter. I saw the worker look at me, grimace, shrug, and then begin ladling food onto an old chipped enamel plate, the kind usually associated with camping. When the slops had been set clumsily before me, Peter reached over and shoved the plate aside.
First, let's empty that bag and see what we have.
He smiled encouragingly. I'll do it, I agreed, as long as you shove that revolting mess further down the table. Peter looked at me in surprise, then grinned.
Have it your way. Can't say I blame you. They're worse than usual.
Most of these people eat here regularly, I inquired. Peter nodded.
Sure, most are regulars.
The stink emanates from their paws, I noted, as I released the draw cord that held my beach bag securely at the top. I carefully withdrew the bottle and set it onto the trestle table in front of me.
That's nice,
remarked Peter.
How come you travel around with that?
I found it yesterday. Going to find a place for it when I get home, I replied, suddenly worried that Peter might say I couldn't keep someone else's property. He didn't, and then I thought that he had probably had wrangling matches in the past with hobos and their treasures, and didn't fancy a wrangling match with me.
So what else you got?
Peter leaned forward with interest. I pulled out my beach towel and let it flop onto the table.
Your bag and towel look new,
Peter stated simply. I agreed.
What else?
Shaking my head, I replied nothing, which is when a small wallet fell out, its Velcro fastener stuck to the towel. Peter grinned.
That's interesting.
I didn't see that yesterday, I stammered, reaching for the offending object. It was a pretty thing, leather and embellished with a swirling pattern that looked to be carved into the outer skin. The colours were yellow and green, and I was immediately transported back to my vision of tassely furniture and magic carpets.
Come on, Jeannie, open it.
Peter was insistent. No, I nearly screamed at him. I'm not Jeannie. Peter laughed at my irritation as I fiddled with the Velcro clasp, freeing it from its prickly grip on my towel and managing to pull some colourful threads as I did so. Bugger, I announced, I'm spoiling my towel.
Open the bloody wallet, Jean,
demanded Peter, placing an unseemly emphasis on my name. I was suddenly and unexpectedly frightened. With a shaking hand I passed the wallet over to Peter with a signal that he was to open it for me. He opened the wallet, seemed to read for a second, then burst out laughing.
Well, hello, Eugenie Watson. Looks as if your shortened version of Jean should actually be spelt with a G. Jeannie.
He continued to laugh, completely amused by his own observations. The hairs on the back of my neck, and for that matter, the ones on my arms and the back of my hands, stood to attention. Eugenie Watson, I attempted to smile. Yes, that's me. I still don't like Jeannie, I added pathetically. The little bottle, sitting quite majestically, I thought, seemed to catch the light and throw dancing reflections of yellow and green. I grabbed at my towel, stuffed it back into my beach bag, and popped the bottle safely on top. Further examinations of the wallet revealed a few $100s, a couple of very reputable credit cards, and a senior's photographic identification, further announcing the cardholder to be Eugenie Watson, address just 2 blocks from the drop-in centre. Peter decided to drive me to my home, but I was concerned that I didn't seem to have any keys that would let me into my place of residence.
Don't worry about it, Jean.
Peter was trying to be nice. He pulled the car up outside the address on my identification card.
I bet you have keys stashed under a big rock or something. Lots of old people do that.
I looked at him with contempt, not so much of the old, and I can't imagine being that stupid. Who would leave a set of keys out for someone to find? Peter jumped from the vehicle almost as soon as he had it parked, the engine barely having had time to stop. Racing to the front door of the lovely cottage, he paused to glance around him, then made a beeline for a large ornamental gnome decorating a spectacular rose garden. The keys from beneath the gnome fit the front door lock perfectly, and with trepidation I walked into what was supposed to be my home. Glancing around, I could see there were no wall hangings or luxurious furnishings adorned with tassels. I was disappointed.
"You okay?"
Peter inquired solicitously. I didn't want him hanging around, and I certainly didn't want him to twig to the fact that I had no recollection whatsoever of ever having been in this house. "I'll be okay." Peter delivered a gentle pat to my shoulder.
"Call the doctor if you keep having memory troubles. I don't want you wandering into the drop-in centre any time soon."
He laughed, then left. I wandered about the house, not entirely convinced that I was where I was supposed to be. What if some poor homeowner came home to find me asleep on their bed, or worse, naked in a bathtub? I tried to think logically and then decided to roll with it. I had identification that put me legally, fairly and squarely on the premises. My name at least felt familiar, and when I checked the inside of the fridge, I found all the foods that appealed to me. There was even an unopened bottle of lactose-free milk. Thank the Lord, I wouldn't be adding my own personal stink to the atmosphere tonight. So I did what any normal person in their own home would do. I prepared a meal, had a shower, and dressed in the bulbous pyjamas I found neatly folded in the bottom drawer of the bedside unit. I liked them. They were all blue and green with lots of swirls and intricate patterns. It was still only the middle of the afternoon, but I decided to explore a little further and then risk a nap, but not until I had found a nice place for my bottle tree bottle. I placed it firmly on the mantelpiece in my neat and tidy lounge room, then wandered off to explore the writing desk that sat neatly in a corner. It appeared that I also had a neat and tidy bank balance. There was enough money for however long I proposed to live, popped away in investments, delivering a healthy monthly income. It seemed that I owned the little cottage outright. Nice, but why couldn't I remember any of this? I fell asleep on my comfy couch pondering such things, wearing my beautiful bulbous pyjamas whilst admiring the bottle tree bottle which was winking in the last afternoon light shining through my front windows. I had a very interesting dream. Back in the tassel room, I was lounging in my colourful pyjamas on the tassely sofa with the tassely pillows, admiring my freshly painted toenails aglow with purple varnish. I was still wearing the lovely leather flip-flops, but had pushed my feet to dangle over the edge of the furniture, just in case I had sand or seagull poop stuck to the leather soles. As I admired my iridescent walls of yellow and green, I was aware of the weight of a rather large book pressing heavily on my lap. I glanced down, irritated by the pressing discomfort of the large volume. Raine Lore. The book title was profound in its simpleness, and with a trepidation that began at the base of my sleeping spine and infiltrated upward and outward in radiating heat, I flipped the book open. It fell to a page that was obviously well read and well worn. Retirement is mandatory. When a genie reaches 1,000 years of service, she must retire. Upon reaching the 1,000th birthday, a genie will have the use of one last wish. The final wish must be used to assist a mortal, and by so doing, the genie may choose a desired retirement outcome. Upon successful completion of a mortal's wish, the genie may choose life in the mortal world or life in a genie retirement village. If the genie chooses to create a life in the world of mortals, they will age and die accordingly. Most genies begin their mortal life in their late 50s, mortal years. It is imperative to remember that once a genie fully leaves their bottle, there is no way to return. They must remain in the mortal world. However, should the genie decide they want to remain in the bottle, They have only 1 week to find and assist a mortal by granting a wish. When the mortal has been served, the genie's bottle will be permanently sealed and fused with other retiree bottles. The genie will find himself in a wonderful resort-style environment. She will have corridor access to a myriad of bottles housing other residents. Restaurants, a movie theatre, swimming pool, shops, gym, and an endless supply of entertainment. The genie can expect to live another 1,000 years in blissful comfort and companionship before passing gently away in her sleep. Conversely, should the genie fail in their mission to assist a human, or decide not to be bothered with the whole assisting thing, they will be expelled from the bottle and be forced to undertake the mortal option. Such was the realness of the dream and the intense trepidation I was feeling that I sprang immediately to full wakefulness. I came to the only conclusion I could. I really was a genie. My dream was not really a dream, but a memory of what had gone before. I had chosen a mortal life over a life of blissful comfort. What was I thinking? And this was what I had dreamed up for myself. Or maybe I had failed in my Good Samaritan mission. I supposed I could have done worse. I had a lovely cottage, plenty of money, and great access to shops, beaches, and anything else I could want. But this body, really? Did I have no previous knowledge of the aging human condition? All older humans appeared to carry their frames in a slightly bent posture, putting up with constant pain, struggling, as many of their body parts slowly but inevitably succumbed to gravity, seeking a final fusing with the earth. I glanced around my living room and gave myself permission to relax and take in my surroundings. The future was set. There was no going back. The bottle was closed. I flicked my eyes up to the mantelpiece where I had placed my former home. To my great amazement, the bottle was no longer where I had left it. Rushing from my place on the sofa, I panic-searched the house but could find no sign of my bottle, nor for that matter any sign of a break-in. The bottle was gone, and I was well and truly beginning my life. I had chosen this, or I deserved this, and I had to make the most of it, but not before I had one last word with Peter at the drop-in centre. I was certain that I had not dreamed up the bottle tree bottle, but I wanted confirmation from Peter that he had, indeed, seen my lovely possession when I emptied the beach bag contents for him to inspect just that very morning. The drop-in centre was busy. It was that time of day when the homeless drifted in, hoping they would score a free meal and a bed for the night. By the time I arrived, people were being turned away because all the beds were full. Some were hanging about in the hope that they could grab a meal before being turned back onto the streets. I have to admit, I sort of considered trying it on for a feed, but then I thought of my well-stocked fridge and shrugged the thought away. I approached a young woman I had seen at the centre the night before. She had been in charge of distributing extra blankets and acted as a sort of security guard for those who thought their disgusting possessions were in some sort of peril. I approached her with a big smile. "Hi," I greeted. "Is Peter here?" She looked at me with vague recognition in her eyes. "Peter?" she asked. "Yes, Peter who was helping with admissions last night." I was already beginning to lose patience. These do-gooding people seemed to bring out the worst in me. "No Peter working here," was the terse reply. I described tousle-headed, unshaven Peter. The girl shrugged. "Only Peter like that is one of the street people that come in from time to time. Haven't seen him for a while. You could try the back streets around here. You might get lucky." I wasn't sure what she meant by getting lucky, but persisted with my inquiry. "Peter was absolutely here last night, assisting with the homeless. He assisted me, and I need to have a quick word with him." "Take my word for it," answered the girl, growing irritated. "Peter is someone best left alone, if you don't mind my saying so. I haven't seen him in a while, and I don't mind one bit." With that said, she turned and left me standing on the steps, impatient homeless, pushing past in a last-ditch effort to get some nighttime comfort. Puzzled, I turned and retreated to my little cottage, 2 streets from the ocean front, Whereupon I decided there was nothing more to be done. Perhaps I would run into Peter at some stage, in which case I would satisfy my curiosity regarding the bottle. But for now I had no choice but to settle into my new life with my new identity and make the most of being a genie in retirement, although I still had the vaguely unsettling thought that perhaps I should have chosen or worked harder for the retirement village option instead of the one I now found myself living in.
June.
I was running out of time, rapidly. I knew the importance of sealing my future within the weekly time frame of my birthday, but how do you get somebody to spot and rub your bottle when it had been buried for so long beneath a wretched dead tree on a sandy dune, essentially in the middle of nowhere? I had thumbed through the Genie Handbook so many times, but I could not find any instructions on how to unbury my own bottle. As it turned out, nature took charge. On the eve of my birthday, a monster storm rolled in from the ocean, causing high tides to flood the sand dunes, which, in turn, uncovered the cursed tree roots that had me imprisoned, and lo and behold, the neck of my bottle was revealed to the world in general. The odds still weren't good that someone would find me and rub my home's exterior, releasing my head and torso into the world so that I could grandly appear in a whiff of smoke to declare the rubber to be the owner of a wish of potentially grand proportions. I wanted to stay in the bottle permanently, as there had been many great reports floating in the ether regarding the retirement village, and I longed for some company after 1,000 years of isolation, which had been broken only by the odd human demanding a wish or two. It was just pure luck that a derelict old lady had succumbed to a bottle of cheap liquor and fallen comatose in an unattractive, smelly heap in the dunes, not long after the storm had broken. I could see her through the opaque glass of my bottle as she snored and shifted in her sleep, lit up by the overhead moon hanging in a clear night sky. I tried willing her to wake, hoping she would see my bottle and be curious enough to rub at the irresistible glass. Eventually my wish was granted. The old girl woke when the sun was high. She blinked and groaned and rubbed at her sorry eyes for a good 5 minutes before raising herself and brushing the sand off her pitiful clothes. Luckily for me, the sun glinted off the green-yellow glass of my home, attracting the old woman's attention. Like a magpie to a shiny thing, she took the bait and made her way over to me. Without trying to remove my bottle from the sand, she reached for the hem of her skirt, spat, and then transferred the spit to my bottle, rubbing vigorously at some perceived mark or other. Thanking the universe for small mercies, I plopped my head and chest majestically from the bottle neck and declared, "I am the genie of this bottle." You may have a wish of huge proportions, and as this is the last wish I will ever grant, I suggest you think about it very carefully. The woman did not seem at all surprised by my grand entrance. She merely dropped the hem of her skirt, squinted through the plume of smoke that had accompanied my flourish, and spoke.
"Well, you're a bossy one, aren't you?"
"Not really," I responded. "After all, I am magnificent and completely in charge of your future from this point forward." It turned out that the woman had an extremely complicated set of circumstances and needed some thoughtful guidance as to how to proceed with her future. It didn't help that her brain was still completely fogged by residual alcohol and that she appeared to be in need of a good meal. "I tell you what," I suggested. "Let's go inside while we sort you out. I can't hang around half in and half out forever, you know."
"Have you got anything to eat in there?"
The woman waved her hand vaguely in the direction of my bottle, seemingly not at all perturbed about the prospect of visiting in what appeared to be rather cramped quarters. "Yeah, but you have to promise one thing. No wishing for anything until we outline your future in detail. We don't want you accidentally squandering your wish away on a desire for a chocolate chip cookie or worse, a bottle of wine." I gave her my most serious look. "She replied,
Let's just get on with it. I'm hungry.
The smell of Jean, her name she informed me, overpowered the confines of my living room, and because I couldn't waste magic cleaning her up, I liberally sprayed Lily of the Valley perfume until we both were threatened with a choking death by inhalation. Jean settled back on my favourite tasseled couch, resplendent, she thought, with a pair of my best leather shoes firmly attached to her feet. I didn't remember giving her permission to wear them, but she had taken more than one liberty while I prepared a snack in an effort to keep her nagging about food to a minimum.
It's nice in here,
she declared.
What if I want to stay in your bottle?
Not happening, I replied firmly, panic rising in my magical belly. You have to tell me your circumstances, and we have to word a wish that will set you on a bright future. I waved a hand at her attire. Surely you can think up something better than falling drunk asleep in the sand dunes. It must be a pretty miserable existence. Jean looked at me unhappily, then went on to explain that she had escaped a brutal marriage many years previously. Freedom from her husband had come at a heavy cost. She had no money, very few work skills, and had had to remain on the run to keep from being stalked and bashed. Surely he's given up by now, I declared, feeling sorry for the old girl. A tear slid down her grimy, wrinkled face.
I haven't seen or heard of him for a while now, but I have gotten pretty good at keeping a low profile. I never want to see him ever again,
Jean declared miserably. Well, not to worry. I can incorporate his permanent disappearance into your grand wish. If he isn't already dead, he will wish he was.
But that's no good,
Jean wailed.
You don't know him. He'll find me and punish me harder if he thinks I was behind making him miserable.
A crippled, wheelchair-bound beggar, barely surviving in the poorest part of India, will have plenty else to occupy his mind. We can add Alzheimer's as a final touch. Jean clapped her hands in delight.
Oh, you are so naughty.
I thought my plans ranked a little higher than just naughty on the dastardly scale, but I let it slide in my desire to move forward, formulate Jean's future, and get on with my own plans. Tell me what else you want, I instructed, hastening to add that Jean should not include the word wish in her demands. It turned out that her desires were simple. She wanted what most humans want, peace of mind, a nice little home in a nice area, and money in the bank to live comfortably for the rest of her life. I told her that her desires were easy peasy for a genius genie such as I, and that she should rest while I nutted out the details. Jean fell asleep on my sofa, with my leather shoes on her grimy feet. A trail of drool slid a silvery path down her chin and slipped onto my best tasselled cushion. When she awoke, I handed her a damp cleaning cloth for my pillow and a sheet of handwritten notes. Eventually, I deemed the pillow slip to be clean and allowed Jean to read her notes silently. When she had finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and smiled.
Not bad,
she said simply. There could be a few side effects, I warned.
Such as?
The old girl seemed to be running short on words. Well, I pondered for a moment. You might suffer a bit of confusion in the beginning and not know who you are and where you're going. I have made contingencies for some guidance for you when you wake up outside the bottle. Look for Peter at the drop-in centre. He'll steer you in the right direction.
How will I remember to look for Peter if my memory is playing up?
Jean queried. Trust me, I insisted. You'll find your way.
Can I keep the shoes?
She asked with what she thought was a winning smile. I suppose. I can always get more.
And some of those nifty pantaloon-type pyjamas,
she insisted. Good grief, woman, can we just get on with it? She was staring at me with a "we are not moving forward until you promise" look. I'll see to it that there are some in your bedroom dresser. Now, read the notes, out loud and carefully, right to the end. Jean grinned at me and then began to read.
I wish. I like to match pertinent quotes to my Tree of Life stories. For this one, I've chosen a quote from Eldon Taylor. The absolutely awesome, incredible power of belief is the genie in your life. This project seems to have taken forever, Dee. I hope my friends at Medium enjoy it.
Oh, they will. Let's go to bed.